Hello, good day. South Africa's future, part 15. Well, as you've probably been aware, I've kept off the South African subject for quite a few months now, because I wanted to let the land settle a little bit and see if any progress was being made. I'd had reports back from the British government when I wrote that letter to them. I had obviously my friends and colleagues in South Africa keeping tabs with me. Plus I've had people who've interacted with me on my YouTube channel give me information from their position of where they stand and where they sit. I've obviously been following the news on South Africa along with news in other parts of the world as well. And I just wanted to bring this latest report in terms of my views and thinking on South Africa. First of all, I want to just review parts of my video that went out, I think it was part 13, when I read out the letter from the British Foreign Office in response to my letter to them on what was going on in South Africa. And I'd just like to cover some of those points. So here that is. Here is the letter. Let me read it to you, and then you can form your own opinion. Okay, here it is. Dear Mr. Mathers, thank you for your email of the 21st of March to the Foreign Secretary about South Africa. The Central Correspondence Unit at the Foreign Office and Commonwealth Office, FCO, has been asked to reply. The British government understands the need for land reform in South Africa, and we welcome the South African government's assurance that the process of land distribution would be orderly within South African laws and taking into consideration both the social and economic impact. This assurance between the South African government and the British government is basically words. It's no more than that. The words of one set of politicians to the set of another group of politicians, and it really means very little. Yes, I don't disagree with what they are saying, but you know, it's the sort of politicians we have in our country. Most people find it difficult to trust them, quite honestly, as is the case with South Africa and the South African population, who tend not to trust their politicians either. So we've got one set of politicians giving assurances to another set of politicians while all the mayhem is going on underneath. We further welcome President Ramaphosa's commitment that land reform will be carried out without negatively affecting economic growth, agricultural production and food security, and his assurance that he would not allow any smash and grab interventions. Well, I think in this particular paragraph, I mean, again, Cyril Ramaphosa's assurances here are meaningless. I mean, okay, there have been no unauthorized land grabs that I'm aware of in the last few months, but in terms of affecting the economy of the country and the economy of the land and the social links and between people, it's just getting worse, and you know, which is having an impact on everyone's well-being over there. So it's more words, but it isn't getting to the action of trying to prevent the real crime that's going on in South Africa at the moment and the murders that are taking place, and putting a firm stand on that. We share your concern about the high level of violent crime in South Africa. The South African government assures us that tackling crime in all its forms is a high priority. The British government is in regular contact with the South African authorities, and close and effective partnerships in law enforcement are an important part of the UK-South Africa bilateral relationship. Sadly, violent crime affects all communities in South Africa, and huge progress has been made since 1994 to address the issues that came with apartheid. This part of the letter I find difficult to accept. We're talking about these crimes that are taking place and murders taking place that I have sent very stern messages to the British government about, in terms of what's happening to my friends and colleagues in South Africa. And yes, you know, the government are acknowledging it, and they are condoning it, and they are you know, but they are basically sort of changing the tune of it to say, you know, they're bringing apartheid into the process, and apartheid finished, as we all know, a couple of decades ago. And what's that got to do with guys being murdered on farms, some of who weren't even born during the apartheid period? And, you know, they're just being caught up in this. I just think we're deflecting things. Again, this is political positioning from the British government to say, look, it's not good, but it's being sorted out. Racial tensions unfortunately remain on all sides, but should not be overstated. Well, I don't think it's a question of overstating them. I think it's a question of the facts of the facts. This is what is happening. You know, people are being murdered on their own land by thugs and criminals, and those thugs and criminals are not being dealt with accordingly. And it just is being allowed to happen on a continual basis. And it appears, based on the news reports and newsreels from all sides, that the South African government is doing its best to ignore it. They are showing a surface of concern, but underneath they are ignoring it. And it isn't, in this particular case, it's not just white farmers that are being killed. It's black farm workers and black farmers as well in some cases. So, you know, this is to me looking very, you know, we can say what we like and smooth it over and try and say, well, this is part of something that happened many, many years ago. This is a result, and it's just got to be smoothed over. Well, I think we've got to take a firm hand with this, and we've got to say, look, as the South African government, you have got to take action at a very high level to stop this continuing. And the British government, you have got to put pressure on the South African government to do this. South Africa has a strong and independent judicial system, an active civil society, strong governmental and intergovernmental institutions, as well as a respect for the rule of law. It has an internationally respected Bill of Rights written into its constitution. This ensures that all South African citizens are guaranteed the same rights and protection from the government. Absolutely. I agree with the statement, but it must be put into practice by the South African government. Of course, every citizen of South Africa is protected by the government, black and white. So it is up to the government to take firm action to ensure these crimes stop. It's for the good of the country as a whole that they get a grip of this and make it stop and not smooth over it. Our High Commission in South Africa continues to monitor with the situation and raises issues of concern with the South African authorities where necessary. When British nationals have been affected, we have discussed these cases with the South African authorities in accordance with our consular responsibilities. We also work with South Africa to deliver results through close and effective partnerships in law enforcement, for example, providing training and capacity building to the South African Police Service, and through the links between our legal systems. That is all very good, but let's see it working in practice. Let's see firm hands being put in place to deal with the thugs and the murderers. Otherwise, it's just words on a piece of paper. The UK is committed to supporting the South African government to solve the deep-rooted historical problems of social inequality and poverty, and the UK will do all it can to help South Africa succeed. Again, very strong words on the paper, but it's got to happen. Of course they will do all they can to help the South African government succeed, because the British government are partly responsible for the process anyway. If they want to quote the history, well, they are part of it. But it's about now. It's about sorting the problems out now to get stability. And you can't have a country run on fear and thuggery. It just can't work. It's all very well saying there's a constitution and there's laws and there's this and every citizen's protected. Clearly they're not. So clearly there has to be some intervention by sensible people to make it happen. I want to show you a video that's come out very recently. This has been produced by the HuffPost of South Africa. I don't go, I'm not leaning one side or the other. I'm being clear and straight down the line. But I'm revisiting the whole point of South Africa's position. I stepped away from it for a few months deliberately. I've continued my interactions with all my South African friends in South Africa, both black and white, and I'm now putting the foot down again in terms of the situation of where things are in South Africa. Here's a video, a very recent production of the situation on the ground with farmers, black and white, in South Africa, in the Free State. Have a look at this.
No farmer in this country can be safe at any stage of his life anymore in this country.
Amo go ntho di setsa ka tema teng ana isile bophelo bo se mo phelo ha o sa bolawe motho wa rapolasi o bolawa mosebetsi wa polasi isile bophelo bo se bo bona bo se bo etsa haholo le dipente mona. Haholo ntho e bohloko ba bolawa bo ramapolasi ha ba sa o fumana ona la ba rapolasi ba bolawa ba go kwa ke ntho tse dulang di re tshosa le rona tse ena haholo bontate bana ba baso bona ke bona ba bolawa mos.
Dit lyk vir my hulle wil doodseker maak dat niemand hulle kan herken later nie. En dit is hoekom die koelbloedige moord plaasvind. Maar nou aan die ander kant weer, dit is dit wat hulle wil wel steel. Is die van so ernstige aard dat hulle nou die ding moet pleeg nie. No farmer in this country can be safe at any stage of his life anymore in this country. And every day you must walk around, look over your shoulder. Every morning if you open the storage rooms and the workshop and everything, you open outside. When you go outside, you must look through the windows, check where your dogs are, check if you see something outside. You must look around the corners with your gun in hand. You can't even holster it because they come around the corners and they kill you point blank.
Ka mo gore bona batho ba se ba ikenela ka tema rona ha re rema ka maoto mmuso re rinkela molao matso empa batho ba teng ba ntse ba tswela pele ho nkela molao matso ba nka maphelo a batho ba so so ntwe na ha isa ka tswela nteng ba re bona mmuso wa rona o hulanya maoto.
Het ons toevallig op ons eie plaas is daar een van ons plaasbestuurders vermoor, koelbloedig en baie lelik gedoen.
Abula ho letsa monna batho sheba sheba fana hore di matafole ka tmo so lo di spit gafole ho so ruduwe mono kana go ntse ba maketse ba hlokomela gona ntho e tselang ke a lo re so hla batho ba fika ba lwantsha ho fihlela ba hlaba monna wa hae ba mo nka ba mo fasa ba mo bolaya hona polasing. Ntate la fa suwe le ka nkenya a fa suwe matso le maotwana fa se le tswe teng maotwa o na le motho mo le mana go betse teng le madi fela mo ma wela kana bo le sa tsebena o hlabue ka Ho nna o lo bohloko ka nako e. Ha ke nagana bana ba motho yo nna ba bakala.
It seems the guys saw the opportunity to attack my dad, and when the morning, the Saturday morning, 6 o'clock, he opened the stable for them to milk. Two of them, the George and Jan, that had to milk. They came in, and after my dad had opened the gate and the third door he opened of the stable around the corner, they came from behind, the four attackers, and they hit him with pangas, with one panga and a few sticks and kiris.
Lefu ya lekala khutlelo ntate ntho mo ngwe taba. Motho ha bola ile a bola. Ha o tsitse a gaola letsogo jwale ka pele. Mehle ya pele. Hobane jwale ha ona thuso ke a o bola ne jwale. Ha ke qeta ho bola ke etsa 2 weeks fela ha qeta ho patua ke khutlile. Ke lokoloso o thwa ke la molao. Ene le tlo go mo le la ke fumana molato ke ja monate.
The gang leader that attacked us were in custody and in court about 3 times, 3 farm attacks previously, and every time he got out, and he came again, and he will come again and again and again. So there is no justice for us as farmers in that respect.
Maar dan verder wat dit betreft, moet ons onszelf op die politie beroepen. En ons het 'n polisiestasie wat hier omtrent so 5 of so 8 kilometer van ons af is. Maar een van die probleme is, daar bly niemand meer by die polisiestasie nie. Hulle bly in Ladybrand en dan kom hulle in die dag van 9:00 tot 4:00 in die middag by die polisiestasie beman. En dit is vir ons geen waarde nie. Want ons gaan nie in die dag 'n polisieman nodig hê nie, ons gaan hom in die nag nodig hê as ons moeilikheid opkry.
In the Free State, this calendar year, as from January up until the end of April, we had 12 farm attacks. Nee? Up until the 18th of June, we had 17 farm attacks. In 2003, with the Commission of Inquiry into the farm attacks, that was the first one. They already identified it's not only producers that's being targeted or that gets killed. It's also workers staying on farms and workers working for the farmers that's been targeted. About 70%, it can even be higher, 80% of farmers do not report crimes to the SAPS anymore. That's on property related crimes. So it makes then the analysis and the investigation of crimes very problematic, because SAPS cannot conduct a comprehensive crime pattern analysis and allocate their resources on a 20% crime pattern. It's too little, so it is a problem.
Emotional damage is, I think, forever. I think you will never get totally over the emotional damage that is done to you in such an attack.
Josa na tshepa ga sa tshepa next. Ya ke peni ke na le peni. Hobane jwale o kwa bophelo ba bona bo tsietsi. Mo tsietsi ho.
As so daar is vir my nie 'n verskil of ek hier bly. Ek is gelukkig hierso, bly lekker hierso. Ek sal nie sê ek voel bedreig nie, maar ek is bekommerd.
Now, as you can see, the situation is very worrying on the ground. Despite, and I mean, I've got South African friends who don't live closely to what's going on in the Free State or on the open velds and the farmlands across the country. There are people who live in oblivion in Cape Town. There are people who live in oblivion in parts of other parts of the country as well, both black and white. And You know, it is a tough nut to crack. That there's no doubt about it. South Africa. The problem we've got is we seem to think we have to rely on politicians. We seem to think we have to rely on politicians, and politicians generally around the world tend to lie, and look after themselves. Basically, that's what they do. Whether they're Western politicians or African politicians or American politicians, or Russian politicians. That's what tends to happen. They paint the world as they want you to see it, and that's how it gets. And they form these alliances with each other on favours of various kinds. Let's be realistic. That's what happens. I mean, just an example over here, very recently, our Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, who I've got to say, as a person, I like him. He's always, to me, stood out because he's the Mayor of London before that, and because he's been in the media, so he knows how the media works, having been an editor. He's a straight shots sort of individual. That's how I've always read him. Now he's in the office in government as the Foreign Secretary, one of the highest levels of government minister there is in our government, under the Prime Minister. He's being forced to toe the line quite a lot. Not in everything. I mean, he's still quite forthright in terms of his Brexit position. So it'll be interesting to see how long he does last with Theresa May. But very recently, I mean, we had a vote on Heathrow about should it go ahead or should it not, with the ministers voting in Parliament. And Boris stated categorically years ago that if Heathrow was going to have a third runway, he would be lying down in front of the bulldozers, along with the Labour with the Labour ministers and everything else. He wouldn't see that. He wouldn't see that through. He wanted a new airport built in Boris Island up the Thames estuary. But anyway, a vote was made in Parliament this week by all the MPs, and the Conservative Party government insisted that everyone had to vote yes. There was no, the whips. It was made legal by Theresa May and the government, and the whips were informed that all Tories had to vote yes for the airport. Which, of course, if Boris was to vote no, then he would be out on his ear, he'd be out on out of a job. So instead of voting no and standing his ground, he decides to flip off to a different part of the world, Kabul, so he doesn't have to vote, which to me is just childish, because we know where he sits. Now, in the case of Labour, Jeremy Corbyn did get the whips out to say all Labour must vote no, or all Labour must. He just made every individual to themselves as to what they want to do. And look, the majority were for building the runway. Now, I don't think it will happen even now, because I think there'll be other complications that are going to go through with this, and it's going to be a long way off. And it's a stupid idea, quite honestly. It is a ridiculous idea if we think the economy is going to improve by doing that. Yeah, we've got to do things, of course we have, but that's not the case. But the point I'm making is, when you have senior people like that playing around and flipping around, now it should make no difference whether he's in the country or not. I mean, in a voting system in Parliament, we have people on sick beds and trolleys being wheeled in to cast votes and wheel out. They can't do it sitting in a hospital bed or sitting in Kabul. They've got to be actually going through an old building in the middle of Westminster to get a vote done, when we know where they stand already. Now, these are the people we trust in governing our country, and therefore governing our lives. So I'm saying to everybody, politicians lie and tell you what sometimes they think you want to hear, but they don't tell the truth. They never tell the truth. Whether it's the old apartheid government before or the new one today, and whether it's Tories or Labour in this country or anywhere else in the world. People have got to read things for themselves, and that's what I'm saying to you. This issue with South Africa at the moment is all thuggery and crime being built up and excuses to cause mayhem. That's all it is. And, you know, it's up to governments to protect its citizens. That is very critical here. The government has got to protect its citizens, all its citizens. Forget about the voting. It's got to protect its citizens. That's what's got to happen. And if it doesn't do that, then it shouldn't get any support from the British government or from any other government, as far as I'm concerned. It knows that the world is in a little bit of a mayhem. The people around the world are feeling disenfranchised with their countries anyway. So governments have got a free hand to ploy these things themselves, just to a large extent. It's the whole thing with Russia. You know, everyone in our country and in European countries, all sort of, not so many went to the World Cup. A few went, but not so many went to the World Cup because, you know, Russia and its position with the West, and, you know, is it right for us to be showing faces there? A lot of South Americans went to Russia. A lot of people from the Far East went to Russia. But looking at the reports and hearing people that are out in Russia now and looking at the country, and I've been to Moscow once, so I couldn't get a read on it from just being in Moscow on one occasion. But what a nice country, and what nice people, what a nice event they're staging, what glorious scenarios are being put in front of foreigners that are going there for the first time. Now, how it will roll out eventually, who knows? Who knows? Anyway, that's all I've got to say for now. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.